philosopher Socrates said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." It has been 40 years since China's reform and opening up, and it's timely for us to examine the development of our life and our nation. So, what do we mean when we talk about the Chinese national spirit? What are the contemporary challenges and opportunities in its development? And what's the relationship between traditional Chinese values and the modern national spirit? To discuss these issues and more, I'm very happy to be joined in the studio by Professor Li Jingzhao from Beijing Foreign Studies University, Zhao Miao, partner in Angier Law Firm, and Anna Tangen, current affairs commentator. That's our topic. This is a dialogue. I'm Yang Rui. Welcome to Dialogue. Back in the year 2013, President Xi Jinping came up with the idea of a China dream, which means we are able to combine the national spirit with patriotism. Now, these days, the younger generation of the Chinese seem to be very zealous about patriotism. And they are called the little pinks, or 小粉红, which means they will do whatever they can to safeguard the dignity and the national pride of China whenever there is the slightest hint about criticizing China. What do you think of this crusade by the young Chinese in the context of China dream? Do they project a very good image about China?
Thank you for covering the topic. The definition of China's national spirit is a very timely topic because we're going through a kind of national identity crisis because China is changing too fast and the world surrounding is changing too fast. So we need to pause and think, what can we as Chinese bring to the world and what is the future for China? I don't think these little pink, these netizens called the little pink, they can represent the national spirit of China. Because by definition, by President Xi Jinping, the national spirit has 4 dimensions: creativity, hardworking, unification or alliance, and seeking a national dream. So a lot of little pink, they are irrational, illogic, and very impulsive when they attack different opinions. I think what they lack is to ask themselves what they can build healthy public deliberation and what they can do to actually produce more constructive changes for China.
Given the divided spectrum of public opinions these days, inevitably, I mean, the society of China is characterized with a lot more plurality in terms of the values and people's faith. You are a lawyer. When you examine the life of the Chinese and the image of China, what would be the first message that crosses your mind?
It's about obedience or following of the rules. I think that's going to be the #1 priority or the most important thing.
We play game based on rules of the world, right?
Yeah, rule of the world, rule of law, rule by law. And potentially, I personally doesn't really believe in this kind of nationalism or collective kind of thinking or collectively this one uniform set of values to be overly emphasized as well. And actually, you know, the definition about this little pink is kind of challenging to my understanding. This is the first time I heard about this kind of concept or this group of people. And to me, actually, the younger generation, like born in the 90s, I originally thought they would be emphasizing more like individualism, potentially, you know, their personal well-being, they being respected as a person, as a human being, other than, you know, talking about this uniform value under a collective context. So that's kind of surprising to me. And for them, they actually emphasize more about personal growth, personal happiness, pursuit of joy. So that's kind of more commonly shared values, other than, to me, this nationalism or patriotism is more like not really old style or old-fashioned, but it definitely doesn't match up with the younger generation.
Well, that's the next step in Beijing. At the same time, as we've been discussing the issue of little pinks, whose other name would be patriotism, what do you think of their representation and their voice? Would they harm or do good to the formation of the Chinese China dream or the image of China in the 21st century?
There are negative factors on both sides of that. Ultranationalism is the ugly side of things. But you should draw a distinction here between a place like the U.S., which is nation states. I mean, this idea that you created not of uniform people or even languages. You just created a block of people, an area, and this is the state. Very necessary for them to have patriotism and nationalism. China is a civilization state. It exists as an entity that is cultural in nature. So it is very different. So when you see the rise of ultranationalism in China by these little pinks and things like that, it's negative. It's not producing anything. China already knows who it is. Yes, it might be a reaction to this idea of the 100 years of humiliation, but in actuality, these young people have done the least for China. Yet, for some reason, they're the most vocal. Now, remember, this is a very small group of people. And as I said, it's generally something they're trying to do to establish their own identity. I mean, ideology is a lot less sharp than it used to be between socialism, communism, democracy. So people are kind of reverting to a kind of almost tribal identity. And this is the worst part of that.
And perhaps the President Donald Trump should be singled out for standing for tribalism in that he wants to put America first, to go back to the years ahead of globalization. Globalization, by the way, is full of paradoxes. On the one hand, we want to break up the traditional boundaries of nation states. On the other hand, the rise of protectionism and populism threatens to shatter what we wanted to achieve in terms of economic integration and regionalization. So what do you think of this kind of paradoxes? What should China do?
Current trend of globalization is actually a reaction towards the earlier global trend, which is called modernism. So it's a kind of both a recognition of the necessity of modernization and globalization, but also a kind of reaction. So religious fundamentalism, ultranationalism are all signs that people's ideas and priorities are retreating from the emphasis of pluralism and diversity. It seems that a lot of younger generation or middle-aged groups in different countries, both in Europe, in America, and in China, they seem to be tired or sick of quote-unquote political correctness. It's true, although at the same time, on the one hand, we are witnessing globalization, meaning breaking down national boundaries or boundaries of nation state, but on the other hand, the world is getting more and more segmented. And the social media, the global media are actually not witnessing alliance or leveling ground of different cultures, different people. Instead, people and culture are building walls to distinguish themselves from the others. So it is a dilemma. For China, the future has to be more globalization, but I think as the little pink, the younger generation, they have the responsibility of knowing the positive aspects of globalization and this regressive or this retreating aspect of globalization. I think for them, the priority should be to learn how to cultivate themselves, how to be a national or how to be a global citizen.
Former president of the World Bank, Mr. Robert Zoellick, came up with the idea of a major responsible stakeholder to pin hopes on China as a major economy as well as a prospective world leader. What can China do? What kind of humility or sense of decency should China employ in positioning ourselves more properly in rebuilding or improving the current world order?
Well, I think you have to separate style and substance here. I mean, the issue is with China, it moves like a glacier. I mean, it's an inch at a time, and you see it coming. It's 5-year plans. Everything is known in advance. It's not like currently in the U.S. where, you know, literally on a turn of a Twitter, you can have a completely different policy being implemented, or a reversal of policy, as it may be. So the real difference is between where things are going. Donald Trump has made no secret. Today he's pulled out of the postal agreement. This was an international agreement about postal affairs because he says somehow China is taking advantage. Now, the issue here is the United States, the most powerful political, economic, military nation on earth, is claiming that it has somehow been victimized since 2001 in China joining the WTO. Well, yes, its industries grew slower than the rest of the world. But at the same time, these same industries took home 2/3 of the world's profit during that whole time. So what you had is corporate America exchanged jobs for profit. And this is the nature of a freewheeling market economy. But now somehow that is China's fault. The fact that the U.S. imports more is a reflection of the fact that they have consumers who want to buy. No one is forcing them to buy. The fact that the U.S. does not export more or hasn't grown its export is because people don't want to buy them. Now, you can try to blame other people and do that, and that's part of this nationalism. And I think China has to step back and do exactly what it does and say, listen, we're going to move glacially. We're going to tell you what we're going to do, and then we're going to do it. We're not going to turn it on and off. We're not going to reverse course on a dime or a tweet. All right? We're simply going to do what is necessary to improve not only China, but what we believe, what China believes is a better world, because China is integrated into it and sees a win-win scenario as the only way in which it can prosper.
Thank you so much. You are watching Dialogue with Professor Li Junzhao, Zhao Miao, and Anna Tanya. We are discussing purpose of life, aspirations, and faith when China needs to reconstruct itself and transform itself into a major responsible stakeholder. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Let's go back to the attitude of the younger generation towards life, their job, and the future of this country, which should be an indispensable part of the whole world in a community of shared future. Do you think they are becoming more anxious given the stressful life, housing prices going up, and a lot of uncertainty concerning their life after graduating from the universities? So have you ever talked to your students about their feelings, their faith, their anxiety? What would be the solution?
Yeah, that's a very good question. But based on my homework, most of the little pinks are not from the first-tier cities in China. They are mostly from the second, third, fourth. Actually, very interestingly, mostly from second tier and fourth tier. So second tier meaning provincial capitals. Most of them are not from Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, and Guangzhou, and Chongqing, not from these cities. So they are not, most of the little pinks are not the younger generation who are experiencing the highest amount of anxiety and pressure from their everyday life and from their work. So I think primarily, actually, when we were discussing before the program, I think you made a very good point that actually this generation, they have only benefited from the China's reform and opening to the outside world. They are the generation who has appreciated and who has consumed most of the results of our reform and economic development.
And they also, in some cases, enjoy the economic umbrella of their parents, for those who were born in the 80s and perhaps the 90s. But what about the millennium development, millennium generation? They ought to work very hard. What would be the main challenges for the younger generation when it comes to their confidence about the future?
Wow. About this overall, I think this competition, actually academic competition, especially in first-tier cities and also provincial cities, really went very worse, or even worse than my times, actually. So I think they are currently my observation would potentially be, we actually in the outline, we also talk about stay foolish or the lack of foolish people in the society currently. And also that relates to more like a national spirit, but more like, characteristic features of the Chinese kind of thing. And potentially I think we are smart Chinese people. We work very hard and we move very fast. We would say we adjust to changes very quickly, but that's not necessarily a good thing, not only for my generation, my parents' generation, but also the younger generation. It's like we do very good in testing, school testing, doing the exams as well. If you look at the Olympic golden medal, we always kind of rank the first. And it's also a collective effort. It's like you put all the resources you have there, whatever, like whichever direction we point to, we are definitely going to be number one in that direction. And even in the current education as well, I think we kind of, it's so strange that the whole trend we overly emphasize doing good at school, especially by at school, I mean, all with standard answers, doing good at testing, without emphasis on critical thinking. That's the problem, and that to me would be the next biggest issue ahead of us, preventing us, the younger generation, to be the world leader, to have the soft power to actually, introduce China to the world.
Yes. These days, these young people start to adopt values very different from their parents who went through so much hardships. Do you think that there's similar things that are happening in the West as well?
Oh, it's global. I mean, if you look at the S&P 500 and even in China, and you look at the stock market, right? If you go back 60, 70 years, not in China obviously, the 80% of the value of a company was judged by tangible assets. That means the inventory, the factory, the land, everything that you could measure. And only 20% was intangible. Today it's completely reversed. If you look at the stock markets, 80% is intangible, right? You can't see it. It's brand, it's marketing, it's all of these different things, research and development. But it's not something that you can measure, and quite frankly, we don't have measures for that. That's why you have these bubbles that go up in the tech industry. So yes, a lot of young people have been fooled into this notion that it's easy, that you just have an idea and that you come up with it, and somehow they don't even know how to market or distribute it, but they think, oh, he did it, why can't I? Jack Ma, he had nothing. He started out with just a few hundred renminbi, and all of a sudden he's a multi-billionaire. And this isn't really the way it is. It takes a lot of not only good ideas, but tremendous hard work, focus, dedication, and that's gone. But going back to the sense of how you create a better world, it's fine to say that these people are misguided, but it would be a mistake to do what Hillary Clinton did and declare them deplorables. These are the future of China. You have to figure out a mechanism to bring them back into the fold in a constructive way. Every society exists and prospers based on the ability of its citizens to put back into society, not to say, oh, what's good for me? And this is one of the things that not only China is struggling with, but the entire world. I mean, why should I give back? Everyone says, oh, cut my taxes, give me more benefits. But no one says, oh, I want to do something for society, I want to make it better. And without that, you don't have social resilience. Right. And without social resilience, you cannot, it's very hard to recover from a downturn. People, as soon as something goes bad, they say, oh, revolution in the streets, I don't like this. Everything has to change. That is not the solution. So China's main priority here should be building social resilience, bringing these people back into a constructive fold.
Is this social resilience related to the national spirit, kind of?
Of course. That's what, there was a funny thing. A lot of people said when he said the China dream, they thought it was the American dream, which is the dream of the individual.
Individualism.
When he was saying the China dream is the dream of national rejuvenation. Right. It's about what you can do for your country. The famous quote by John F. Kennedy, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. This was the idea behind it. It got a little bit miscommunicated, but I'm sure it'll be brought back.
Yeah, that is the exact motto emphasized by President Xi when he defined Chinese national traits. Yeah, what should be the Chinese national traits, how we can revive the traditional Chinese values. And among the traditional values, he emphasized exactly the responsibility of individual people for the benefit of the whole nation.
Okay.
So,
just a few hours ago, I was interviewing 3 senior religious leaders. One of them was the abbot of Shaolin Temple. We were talking about the faith, importance of values. Today, on the one hand, we see a remarkable social progress in many ways in quarters of the society. On the other hand, look at the rising divorce rate, the erosion of family values in the process of urbanization, when we have more left behind the children and elders who need to be taken care of. And we also have more young university graduates who would prefer to go to temple to seek a quiet life, if not a way of escapism, given the very stressful urban life and the momentum of urbanization. So a lot of these things are happening. What should be done to inspire the young people so that they have faith? Of course, we see more followers of Christianity, Buddhism, Muslims in their millions, to say nothing, in the northwest region of China. So do you think faith, values are eventually and fundamentally the pillar of one's spirituality? And of course it serves to have a better purpose of life.
Yeah, definitely. Every country needs its, in this aspect, I want to use the word spiritual, the spiritual pillars, the core values. After all, we totally lose the guidance or the direction of life if we do not have strong beliefs. But as China is a civilization and it has thousands of years of culture and tradition, and we should open to all different kinds of beliefs. I'm really a fan of diversity and pluralism. I think that's the way that we can, to borrow Aina's word, we can build national resilience. We should ask. I really don't think that the little pink are those people who are willing to sacrifice themselves for the country in time of emergency when they are showing ultra-nationalism online. Most of the time, they are just venting out a kind of sentiments, but they are not asking enough their own responsibilities.
Very good point, well taken. Over the past 40 years, China went through massive transformation and adaptation, integration with the rest of the world. And also the rise of the middle class comes with a lot of new issues concerning rule of law, sense of justice. Today, China says we want to have a more inclusive economy and more inclusive society. But unlike what happened, say, in the late 70s and the 80s, when young people who were benefiting from the resumption of a national entrance examination, the resumption of higher education, they had hopes, they had great expectations about the future. But today, people are left disillusioned after their pockets are full of money, after their lifestyles are getting better. So have you ever thought of the contrasts?
In reality, maybe they are witnessing more anxieties, more pressure associated with middle-class life.
Getting more sophisticated.
Yeah, because I remember when I was here a couple of months ago talking about middle class in China, I mentioned Barbara Ehrenreich's book, The Fear of Falling. Actually, that's the feature of middle class. If you do not keep on going up, then a major family sickness or major traffic accident or natural disaster can bring you to zero. I think the middle class all over the world is facing that problem, the dilemma. Maintaining.
I thought normally that anxiety, that fear of falling actually comes from lack of lack of certainty, lack of predictability because of the rules, the policies constantly being changing, and that was also why if you divide the world to be West and East, it's like China is like a new grow up with a lot of muscles, and you never know what is in his mind, and he might be a troublemaker to the West.
And the new sense of uncertainty, I'm afraid, comes from what's going to happen between the United States and China. Are we going to have this, you see this trap, inevitable clashes between the two militaries? So this kind of things start to obsess elites and those well-educated people who have utterly accepted the American dream. They believe in American values. China is their motherland. They love their country. So what do you think of this sense of anxiety? And
well, the anxiety is there, but I mean, the issue here is that you asked how do you change things, and it's leadership by example. When these kids can see somebody that they identify as somebody they want to emulate, who's doing the things that are pro-society, that are helping society along, then they will follow. And this is the hard part, but also get them involved. Do not leave them on the sidelines. If they're saying, as you said, you believe in your country, okay, we have so many needs. We have young people, old people, all right, who need help. All right, we have schools out in rural areas. Volunteer some time. Show that you care about your country. Or, don't say these things without practicing. Remember, faith is wonderful, but faith in deeds means something. Faith in words are just air. So a lot of it, whether you're spiritual or not, the question is what you do and how you define yourself. Also, with the age of consumerism, this idea that you define yourself by what you have is not good, especially with the middle class. They see somebody who has more, and they say, I'm not as good as them. You should be defining yourself by what you have and what you value, not the things you don't have. That leads only to unhappiness, because you can't have everything.
Thank you so much. There is this popular belief that this modernization campaign is actually a process of rediscovery. Who are we? And where are we headed for when we seek to build a community of shared future and to realize China dream? I'll see you next time.